Hello, everyone, on this cold, rainy Thursday, at least where I am anyway. Might be different where you are. I'm Jim Norris. I'm the publisher of Entertainment Spotlight and the president of Entertainment Marketer. I've been involved in the entertainment communications business for a lot of years, 40 some odd years. So I've been on the receiving end of a lot of publicity, an awful lot. In fact, currently I get 200 to 300 press releases a day. I've got my email address there, and it would have been in some of the emails you've received. Feel free to contact me at any time. You can also find my background on LinkedIn. So why the webinar? Why are we doing this? Getting out the buzz, getting out PR, publicity is super important part of your career, your company, whatever it is you do. So we've brought along one of the experts in the industry, and we'll meet Eric in a couple of minutes. We've got a couple of polls for you in a couple of minutes. The chat is open, so you can chat with people if you like, and if you want people to contact you, just leave your email address in the chat if you want that, or your website, or whatever it is. You can ask questions anytime under Q&A. You'll see that at the bottom. There's a question mark down there, and you can do that anytime. We'll be answering the questions towards the end, but in the meantime, you can ask them anytime you like. This is being recorded, as you heard, and you'll get an email later on letting you know where the recording is. So if you have to leave early or whatever it is, or you had to put your dog out, then you can catch up and get the recording. One important thing in your quest for learning is that what happens is all of us go to a lot of different events, online, in person, take in all kinds of information. But the important thing is the follow-up, what you do afterwards. And what I find works the best is to just make a short list. 5 things you're going to do differently that you didn't do before. Because if you do everything the same as you did before, well, then it's kind of pointless. So that's the key, is later today in the morning, just sit down and say, okay, here's 5 things I learned that I'm going to do differently. So action points is important. Okay, so let's just put you guys to work for a minute. Okay, the first one is where you are located. You'll see various choices there. You can only pick one. So just go in there and indicate where in the world you are. To our American friends, happy Thanksgiving. Ours was in October. Okay, so there's the results. Not too surprising. Quite a few from Ontario, Quebec. Nobody from Eastern Canada, which is surprising. Maybe it's a snowstorm or something. Okay, just give us an indication of what your profession is. This one allows multiple answers, because a lot of people, especially if you're a musician, you probably do more than one thing. But you can just check off the ones that apply: musician, songwriter, music business professional, pro audio professional, educator. And not surprising, a lot of you do different things. Okay, so there's the results. Lots of musicians, lots of songwriters, that's great. Lots of professionals. Excellent. Okay, so it's a real pleasure today to have Eric Alper with us. He's probably, if not the best known or one of the best known publicists in North America, probably, but certainly in Canada. It would be a weird day if I went into my email and there were no press releases from Eric. I wouldn't quite know what to do. I'd have to email him saying, okay, WTF, what's going on? So a number of things. I've known Eric for a lot of years. If you go to Canadian Music Week or North by Northeast or pretty well any conference, you'll see him flying around like the Energizer Bunny. That's what we always used to call him, because he's just fast moving, trying to get around, see everything, talk to everybody, really good at networking, writes very good press releases. I get a lot of press releases from Eric, and they're easy to deal with. So he certainly knows how to do that, because I get some from other publicists and they're kind of a nightmare. So this is a good thing. One big difference with Eric over a lot of other publicists and people in the industry is he really cares about the industry and about his clients, and that makes him kind of different. He has a lot of different clients, from guys just starting out to famous musicians who've been around forever, events. He just worked on Instafesta recently, which was a huge success. So, that makes him different from a lot of them. It's not just calling in or doing a job. So without further ado, I'm going to get rid of these slides here. And then there we go.
There we go. Thanks
Hey.
for the nice words, Jim.
Yeah, very glad you came. It's all good. So if you could just do a couple of minutes on your background. I know it's in your bio and that, but just how you got started in this business and how you got, what your early interests in music were back in the old days.
Yeah. My earliest love of music really came from my grandfather. He had a bar in Toronto called Grossman's Tavern that
Wow.
is still standing, but the family doesn't really have as much into it. And I remember as a kid going down, because my entire family worked there. Past generations used to live above the actual bar. So I learned really early on that music and community go hand in hand, along with food and alcohol. But that's where I developed my love of music, was blues and jazz and pop music and listening to the radio. And as a teenager, I just read everything that I could. I subscribed to Billboard magazine when I was 13 years old. I read every autobiography and biography I could get my hands on. The music industry to me was like Star Wars. It was, I'm fascinated with this world. I have no idea about how to get into it. And when I was in university, I started writing for the campus newspaper and getting to know a lot of the publicists at the major labels, because they would invite people like me to come down and do interviews with artists or cover their shows. So I got a little bit of a bird's eye view about what a publicist actually does. And I loved it, because at the very basic, it was like hand out free records and free concert tickets. And who can complain about that? And so after I graduated, I started off as a publicist, and I stunk. I was awful. But the bands and the artists that I was working were just all starting out, so they were bad and awful too. So we all kind of made our mistakes together, knowing that we were just starting out. Every other publicist in Toronto was charging about $1,000 a month, and I was charging $100 a month. And the reason why I was charging so little was I was so hungry and so desperate and so much loved music that I just wanted to get my education and get my experience. And that was back in 1995. And I haven't really I haven't really stopped since then. I worked for a couple of record labels. One of them was called Shoreline, which had the first EP of Nickelback. And then I worked for a massive distributor and record label called Koch. And Koch had 700 record labels that they were distributing in Canada. And all of the labels were American. And so they didn't know the first thing about Canada. They didn't care to know about Canada. Canada was 3% of the world market to them. So they would give me the box of CDs and the bio and go, there you go. Just run with it. Let me know what you get. And so that's really where I got a solid education in the music industry, because that's where I got to work Guar in the morning and the Wiggles in the afternoon and Ringo Starr in the evening. And I was always the first one to arrive at the office and the last one to leave. And I loved every moment of being at the label. And 7 years ago, I saw the writing on the wall once HMV and all the record stores started to close because we were a distributor. And so I jumped and started again my own company, Eric Alper Public Relations. And here it is. But it's really all of it is based on the love of music and an absolute respect for the musicians. And that the fact that musicians to me are still doing something that is magical. They're creating something out of nothing, and it's something I can't do. Stick me in the studio, wouldn't know the first thing to do, wouldn't know the first button to hit, wouldn't know the first musical note to add to the next one. But I'm always coming at it from a fan perspective, and I think that's kind of helped me being a publicist, because I know a lot of the music writers and editors and people in the media are fans of music as well. So we're kind of playing on the same wavelength a little bit. And that's where the story begins and still continues.
Excellent. No, that's great. And your love for it shows, which is great. Starting off, it's one of the things I talk to clients about marketing as well, is that if you're a musician or a songwriter or you have a company or whatever it is, the first thing is there's got to be something to promote. So sometimes, artists get all excited about letting everybody in the world know about what it is they have. But as hard as it is to understand sometimes you're just not ready. So if you could just talk about that for a minute, and I'm sure you run into that with clients. They come to you and they want to get the word out, but there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah. In 2024, it's a really interesting time that we're living in now, because back in the old days, you would only have very few things to be able to promote to the media and the industry. It would be a new song, a new video, a new album, a new tour date. But now that's not it at all. There's way more. In fact, I'm working with a number of artists. One of them is Andy Kim, for instance, who not only doesn't have a new album out and hasn't had a new album out for the last 7 years, but this year, the 50th anniversary of one of his biggest hits, Rock Me Gently. So that gave me the idea to go back out to the media for Andy to talk about what he was like and what the world was like back in 1974 when he created that song. The ability to create the news using your past music is something that we didn't really have access to pre-Spotify. The amount of remixes, the amount of re-releases, the amount of collaborations that have been created from artists using older songs is a great reason to go back out to the media. Essentially, what you're looking for in a press release is so-and-so does this, and this is why it matters. And re-releasing or recording or going back in the studio or having a tour date isn't really news unless you're a very big artist. Because I think what artists tend to forget is that you're not in competition with another independent artist or another artist from your city. Your competition is The Weeknd, Drake, Taylor Swift. Because yesterday, the entire music world was abuzz about The Weeknd announcing his new album for 2025 in January. So that's one less spot that's available for every other independent artist out there, because we're all after, in the media, clicks and likes and shares, because that's how they're making their money now. Same as selling advertising. But anything that is newsworthy, is absolutely worthy of letting somebody know, even if it's just going viral on TikTok, creating a new dance, somebody liking something. Those are all really quick little tidbits of news items that people can work with, not just you're releasing a brand new single, which tends to not be so newsworthy these days with 100,000 new songs being uploaded each and every day to Spotify.
Wow. Wow. So in developing a story for an artist, because obviously a lot of times they come to you and you've got to figure out like, where's the story here? And what I've found over the years is most people and artists and companies are more interesting than they think they are. And sometimes you have to dig a bit to find something in their past, their parents maybe, or that they went to school in Africa. I mean, who knows what it is? But sometimes there's parts of their background that they just take for granted.
Yeah, we're all like that. I think if you and I we were being asked to write our bio, we would probably leave a lot of really cool things because we don't think it's so important. That's where reading the media a lot comes into play because you know what they're covering as an editor and just as a keen insight person to the media. The more that you read out there, the more blogs you read, the more industry publications you read, the more that you're going to get a sense for what the world is like out there. Just like if you're an artist or you're starting a company, you need to know who else has kind of created your path in order for you to keep building it. You got to figure out, the things that make you interesting because the media needs to write 600 words about you, the artist or the business. And you releasing a new song isn't that exciting because it's really hard to talk about music. You can't go too inside baseball talking about chords and chorus development and studio trickery. 99% of the general public don't know anything about that. And quite frankly, they're not really all that interested about it. What they're looking for is who they are as a person and as a personality. You got to reflect on what inspired your music. Was it a huge life event? Was it a powerful emotion? Was it a unique perspective that you had on your career and your life that helped create it? You got to figure out what the creative process is. What took you to write that song? Did you record it in the basement of your house during COVID? Did you take a trip down to Memphis, Tennessee to do it? Did you record it with other people all on Zoom and you've never met any of the people? Highlight those influences. Highlight what artists you love, what books you've read, what films you watch, what TV shows, what life experiences that artist had in order to create that song or that album in the first place. You got to connect all those experiences with the writer and the editor and the audience, kind of like unpacking all of your ideas about the work. Because again, the press release kind of goes into the story. It's commentary. It's not only commentary on the artist, it's commentary on the society. During COVID, it seemed like almost every song I was getting was about isolation, loneliness, breakups, sadness. All the songs were down tempo. They were very Billie Eilish like. And then once COVID was over, it seemed like here's Charlie XCX, here's Sabrina Carpenter, here's Taylor Swift, like writing really upbeat stuff. So the celebration of joy, the moment of despair, all of that is stuff that the media thrives on because they're storytelling as well. If you've collaborated, mention those collaborations, mention how they got started, create that context about how the song was actually created in the first place. And more importantly, why now? Why you? Why did you write this song? What's so important that the world needs to know? Why is this music so relevant today than say 5 years ago? So those are some of the things that it's kind of my job when I get the bio to ask those questions to move their story away from the bio, which tends to be I, and then I did this, and then I played with these people, then I appeared on stage with these people. The press release and the story afterwards and me following up is really telling your story as an artist and as a company about what makes you so different and so amazing.
Excellent. So if you're an artist, you have some music, and I always hear about getting the word out. How does the artist or the company define their market? How do they figure out where the market is for whatever it is they're doing?
Yeah, I love this question because it's so funny because, when I was watching American Idol and all of these kind of music reality shows, Simon Cowell would always ask, or say, I don't know who you are. One week you're killing it in Motown, the next week you're killing it in country music. And the reason why he's asking that question is because he needs to figure out who the audience is in order to easily market towards that. So you got to start with the very, very basic. What kind of music do you create? You got to figure out your genre, your subgenres to better understand who your core audience is going to be. Are you indie? Are you folk? Are you trap? Are you jazz? Are you jazz fusion? You got to really kind of narrow down. Even if you don't want to put yourself in a little bit of a bubble, it's easy for people to recognize A, if they're the right person to cover this music, and B, just to kind of get in the headspace for what they're going to be listening to. It doesn't matter if one song is jazz and the next song is blues. Well, then you're jazz blues. That's okay. But you got to try to figure out who your audience is, and you got to figure out who your fan is in the most ideal way. What demographic are they? Are they older? Are they on Facebook? Are they younger? Are they only on TikTok and they think Twitter is a cesspool? What's their lifestyle? What's their values? And the more that you know about them, the easier it's going to be for you to tailor everything, not just my press release or your bio, but how you're going to attract them on social media. If you're folk, but you're kind of modern folk like Wilco, use Wilco's hashtag in your social media posts because it's going to attract that audience. Or if you're going to go boost a post on Facebook, go use like people, if you're Southern rock or if you're old school rock and roll, or if you're between the ages of 50 and 60 and you find that you're only on Facebook, only boosted on Facebook who love classic rock artists like the Rolling Stones or Janis Joplin. Like you're going to find that audience that way. Look to who the inspires you as an artist. What's their sound? What's their vibe that's kind of similar? You can name drop that stuff in there. Don't say that you sound like the Beatles, because the Beatles go from She Loves You, yeah, 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 to A Day in the Life in 4 years. So what kind of Beatles are you? Are you early Beatles? Are you psychedelic Beatles? The more that you can kind of figure out who you think your audience is going to be, um, that's going to help you. And geographically is something that I think people tend not to think about. There's a jazz artist that I've worked with for years, and he found out that his streams were doing better in Japan than they were in his home country of Canada. So we kicked around ideas and realized that he was going to start to post on social media at 9 o'clock at night, because in Japan that was 8 o'clock in the morning. So he would be doing live concerts at 3 o'clock in the morning on Friday night to hit noon in Japan. And people in Japan were losing their minds because it was actually the right time of when that country happened to be online the most. So if you found out that your audience is in Vancouver, play with that. Play with that demographic. Maybe do posts at 11 o'clock at night in Eastern time, because that's only 8 o'clock on the West Coast. And that's where setting up your posts or creating live concerts ahead of time and posting them tape to air really, really help out. So are you focusing locally? Are you from St. Catharines and you don't have any other shows in the St. Catharines area except for that? Then just focus on that area. Build your audience first, because you're going to be 1 degree of separation away from people who know you. They're going to go, oh my God, that's Jim. He's like, he comes into like Sobeys all the time. Or are you nationally? Are you somebody that travels around a lot? Are you somebody that tours a lot? If you're in St. Catharines or Toronto and you're not touring in Edmonton, there's probably no reason for people at CTV Edmonton or Global Edmonton to cover you, because they've already got their own local artists in there. I'm still going to send them the press release because you never know. But the days of COVID and doing interviews on Zoom for really great musicians are kind of over. Now it's back to the news. Who's creating news in our market? So tailor your efforts not just towards the kind of music you're at, but geographically as well.
So if you're an artist and you want to get your music written about in any of the various media, because there's so many choices now, how do you put together a list? How do you get that of people to send it to? If you're doing it on your own, if you're just saying, okay, I'm going to put this together and I'm going to get it out to the media, but what is the media and where are they and how do I get their contact information?
Yeah, for sure. I'll tell you a little secret. How I developed my media list way back in the day by doing Google alerts for like-minded artists that we had on the roster, because I figured that if they were covering that artist, chances are they were probably going to be opening up to cover the artist that we had. So I still do that. I get every other publicist's press releases. I'm still doing Google searches and alerts every now and again just to see if there's a new blog out there or to see what's being covered. So focus on those blogs and those magazines, and especially podcasts and radio stations and websites that feature artists and companies like the ones that want to be covered. That includes the really, really small ones who cover independent artists who might not have a big audience. I know everybody wants Rolling Stone. I know everybody wants Now Magazine or Exclaim or the Toronto Star. But the fact is that they're only going to cover stuff, A, that they love, B, that they have a relationship with the publicist of, and C, the one that bring them the hits in order to survive. But these smaller podcasts are really, really great. Some of my bigger artists won't do them because they don't want to give off the impression that they'll talk to everybody. But when you're first starting out, these small podcasts are just, they're they're kind of getting their own experience too. And just like the artist or the company. So they're figuring out how to do an interview properly. The artists are trying to figure out, for the most part, how to even do an interview, what to say, what not to say, how to talk, how to pivot into the really interesting points of your story in case if they're not asking about it. So Google searches are free and they're really, really good to find out who's covering it, and start categorizing your list, whether it's by geography or by print, podcast, blog, media outlet, and then geographically, and start following them on social media, on Threads, on Blue Sky, which is massive now for media because they're all leaving Twitter in droves. Talk to them, read their stuff, compliment their stuff. Never don't insult them. Don't slag them. Cause that's for sure. Because you never know where these people are going to end up. But just regularly keep them updated on stuff. I've got this new single. It may not happen the first time. It may not happen the second time. Even with me on a daily basis, there's people that I think that they should be covering right away because this artist is playing in their town. I'll give you a more specific example. I have an artist from Ottawa who is playing in Calgary in 3 weeks. It's a no-brainer for these people that I'm hitting up to cover them. They know the music, they've covered them in the past. It's a fairly big artist. But in one outlet specifically, the person is going away for 4 weeks on vacation. That's it. That's my only music writer contact at the paper. That's the only person that covers entertainment. So they're done writing about music and they're not going to cover any music for the next little bit. So, keeping them informed on what's going on, you never know when they're going to come up with something. And it's like, I'll give you another example that happened. It didn't even occur to me that this actually could be an angle, but I have 3 artists separately in a 6-week period that released new singles. All 3 of them are former alcoholics, and they mention that proudly in their press release, that they're recovering alcoholics, that music has each saved them in their own little way, or that they left music and they've gotten back. So it's truly an inspiring story. I got an email from one of the biggest newspapers in Canada saying, I want to interview all 3 of them about what life is like working in an environment where your addiction is front and center. And that's something that I would have never thought about bringing them all into it, into a story like that. But you never know when the angles are going to come, especially when you're talking about music venues that are going under. Now there's more all ages venues. Are those artists willing to play all ages dry venues that don't sell alcohol? Is it better for them? So it's a really interesting story. So you never know when that email or that pitch letter is going to come back and become a potential story for it.
So once you start developing a list of people that you're sending material out to, how do you further your relationship with the media? How do you know, obviously you've got relationships that go back forever, but somebody starting out, how do you say, okay, I need to nurture this relationship that I have with these 50 people?
Yeah, you know, the one thing to always keep in mind is that these people in the media are human, and they're overworked and they're underpaid, and they love what they do, and they love, like human beings, to get compliments. So read up or watch maybe the last couple of things that they've written about or that they've covered, and give them a compliment. Say, this was really amazing. I didn't know that this artist is like this. And you're not buttering them up in order to win curry. You're developing a friendship with them. You're developing them from a human being to a human being, of somebody that doesn't want something right away. You know, psychologically, marketers will tell you that the best way to get somebody to do something is not ask them to do something, which is interesting because usually marketing people always think about the call to action: buy this, write about this, post this. But sometimes that doesn't actually work in cases when you're first starting out, because you can't be demanding, because they think that you have no idea what kind of deadlines they're under, what kind of things they cover. Once you kind of understand their life a little bit, they become partners in you. You know, the one thing that I was reading a lot about as a teenager was how many people in you actually made the decision to say yes on something that literally changed that artist's career overnight, and they didn't have to. A lot of it was luck, a lot of it was right timing, a lot of it was just friendship. When you take a look at the scene that happened in Seattle, for instance, in the early 1990s with Nirvana and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam, the people that were writing about those artists in the Rocket newspaper, the weekly newspaper in Seattle, were all friends with Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden. There was a real community that was being developed, and it was fine for them to write about the scene because they were proud of what each other were doing. The same aspect of it happens now. There's scenes happening all over the place in every city. Just treat these people in the media like regular, kind, nice human beings that love what they do, that their job is not to help you out. Their job is to write about really interesting things for their readers. So if you give them a really good story, you can start to develop that relationship, but not ask for things right away. You can say, hey, if you've got, I still say this, like, hey, if you've got an open spot, let me know. But I would never say, I need this, because I may need this. They don't need this. And that's not the best way to do it. So just be kind to people. You'll get a lot further that way.
I think as well, if you can get out in a live situation and meet some of the media at something like North by Northeast or Canadian Music Week or any of these things, and try and set up an appointment, even that you've had a relationship online, and also invite them out to your concerts. And a lot of times they don't have time, but they might come out, and then that just makes for a way better relationship than just email and that's it.
Absolutely. Yeah. When I'm zipping around Canadian Music Week or North by Northeast or any of the other conferences, I'm actually kind of booking in my mind ahead of time of who I want to just say hi to, just for 5 seconds, just to get it into their face that I'm here. Look for where those journalists are going to be on panels. The Globe and Mail has panels every single week online. A lot of the newspapers, a lot of the, sometimes a lot of the, Billboard does a lot of online conferences. They're expensive, but you never know if they're going to pay off in the long run. Do those competitions that are free, even if you think that you're not going to win the indie musician of the year. Those judges are media outlets. Those judges are people who work in the industry, and you never know. I was telling everybody on the roster about the Juno Awards a couple of weeks ago, and I told people, even if you think that you're not going to get nominated, submit, because there's no better way to get your music for $50 for the submission, to get your music in front of 400 of the biggest media people, the biggest industry people, and the tastemakers who run the Juno judging committees. Offer them exclusive content. I don't necessarily like premieres that much because it kind of tells the other media outlet that they're not good enough for it. But sometimes when you're first starting out and you're not going after everybody in the whole world, offer an exclusive live video that you created for them to kind of entice you, to kind of entice them to say yes on it. Ask them if they want to run a contest or a giveaway of signed albums or free tickets to the show, and then figure out from there if that kind of stuff works.
Obviously, one of the big developments in the last 20 years, I suppose, is the development of social media. So, and you've got a killer following. You've got a ton of people that follow whatever you do. So a few clues there. And I see some bands, and I go to their Facebook page and they've got 14 followers, and it's almost embarrassing. So just a few clues from, at some point you had 14 followers. We all did, right? So how did you get it up to, you've got what, 1 million or something? How did you do that?
Yeah. Look, keep in mind, I've got like 2 million followers across social media. I have 2 friends in real life, and you're one of them, Jim. So, it's a very bizarre situation. But, I have a very different outlook than what I think a lot of people are going to tell the musicians. I posted a lot, and in some cases pissed a lot of people off, but that's why the block button is there, and I don't care what anybody else has to say. I'm posting for my enjoyment and for the people that are actually following it. You got to be consistent. If you post on a Monday and you post on a Tuesday and you don't post on Wednesday and Thursday, your audience is not thinking about you on Wednesday and Thursday. And in fact, they probably think that you've quit the music industry because that's all they hear about. You've got to be consistent with the stuff. I don't care if it's every hour. I don't care if it's 8 o'clock at night, every night. Just be out there. You've got to create a calendar if you need to plan the post. I'm using a couple of, I'm using something now called Zoho. It's ZOHO, and it allows me to post across all my social media networks the exact same post whenever I want to. So I actually start my day at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'm done posting the whole day at 8 o'clock in the morning. So it takes me 2 hours to post 52 things like clockwork on the half hour every single day, 24 hours a day. I don't care if anybody else doesn't like it. It works for me because I figured out really early on that the people that are looking at your post at 8 o'clock in the morning are very different from the people that look at your post at 6 o'clock at night. And they're very different from the people that watch your post at midnight. Different time zones, different demographics, different lifestyles. So try to figure out what works for you and post ahead of time. It's okay. You don't have to be on there all the time. The biggest piece of advice is stop posting about your music. Nobody cares. They're already following you. You can post about your music when you have something new. That's where splicing up that lyric video, that visualizer, that live video, that slideshow photos, you can post it once and then splice it up in 15-second spots for the other opportunities. So Do 0 to 15 seconds, 15 seconds to 30 seconds, 30 seconds to 45 seconds, because that's all content, especially in the age of TikTok where nobody's going to watch a 2-minute video anymore. You want to just sell them the best part of the song, even if it's just the chorus. But people are not going to follow you. They're going to follow you based on kind of your music, but they're really going to stick around because of who you are as a person. So reveal a lot about yourself. I know there's a lot of people out there who shy, who don't think that they have something interesting to talk about, but they do. Talk about how you bought your first guitar, talk about your drummer, talk about your producer. Do an interview with your producer for 5 minutes. Talk about how they got their start. Put the spotlight on them. Talk about your favorite cover song that you've ever done. Talk about the first album you ever bought. I've got this reputation for asking a lot of silly, goofy questions on Twitter. But the reason why I love it is because not only do I get a little bit of an insight to who the audience is, but I've never forgotten that, like me right now, people love talking about themselves. People love to hear about who else is out there in the world in a nice, kind, wholesome manner. You don't ask the question about whose album did you hate or what concert did you see that you were disappointed, because you never know when that artist or that producer or that record label or that manager is going to be looking at you going, well, they're an asshole. Talk about the good stuff. Talk about the stuff that you think that other people might be interested in it. Share those behind the scene moments. Even if you have to go back in the studio that you were in 6 months ago to record, to fake film yourself recording stuff, that's okay. You can do throwback stuff. Talk about the creative process. Talk about those personal stories that you and we were talking about in the beginning of this conversation that people want to know about, how you started writing the songs. But more importantly, use those short form videos. We're living in a video world right now. Reels, TikTok, YouTube shorts, Facebook shorts, to showcase those performances, those teasers, those really fun moments. If you're a band and you have 5 members in the band, use all 5 members to take over a day, a week, and get them to do whatever they want to do with it. Even if it's 1 post or 2 posts, the video content is always going to have a much higher engagement than those static posts. I'll say something else that goes against everything else that everybody else has been told. I know you have to engage. I know you should comment, answer questions, interact with your followers in your DMs. I do none of that. I don't talk or comment on anything else because I've got a very specific way to do social media, which is I want them to just enjoy what I'm posting. I'm not looking to sell anything. I'm not looking really to sell what I do for a living, except once a day when I post about my PR stuff. But all of that is really designed to have fun and have my own little tiny spot in the one tiny, tiny corner of the internet for people to get some really fun, wholesome content that's out there. The fact that people can collaborate with others so easily now is something that I wish was around when I was first starting, where we could do these one-on-one interviews now. We couldn't do them 20 years ago. These artists can easily go do interviews with other members of the band. If you're shy, that's okay. Do it with somebody that talks about it. Offer those exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. Video is always the best thing to do. I've got one band that's made 9 different videos for their one song. They've made 4 different lyric videos. They've made a visualizer. They've made a static JPEG of the album cover. They've put up a bunch of photos of them in the recording studio. They did an acoustic version of the song. They posted an a cappella version of the song, stripping away all the vocals and posting that. And then they did the instrumental version. Now you can do a sped up version for the TikTokers. You can do a slowed down version. You can do a remix. You can do a collaboration. All of that is free because you've already developed your song that cost you the fortune. Now it's just about being really creative with what you already have to offer.
Excellent. Well, it's there's some work to it, and that's what some people don't realize. You have to do it regularly, and And yeah, sometimes it is work, but that's just it. It's all work. Everything is.
It is what it is right now. And I'll tell you, I get it. It's most of the artists or businesses did not grow up wishing that they could have a large following on TikTok. Most artists just wanted, depends on when you started, they wanted the love of the opposite sex, money, fame, and fortune. And now, probably, or to show their parents that, look, Ma, I made something of myself. Um, but the fact is that it was always difficult back in the 80s and 90s and 2000, if you made a video that cost you $50,000 to make using your record label's money that you are now in debt for, if you didn't get played on Much Music, you were screwed. Now you had to go out on tour. You left your family, you left your friends. You were now playing across Canada in places in a van that you didn't know where the next town or where you were going to eat, begging people to buy your CD, hopefully to get enough money for the next town, sleep in an awful hotel or on somebody else's floor. It was fun, but by no means was it easy. Not only now are you still competing with the 100,000 people that are uploading songs on Spotify, back then you were in competition with every other artist playing that night when most cities had 70, 80, 90 venues having music nonstop between 6 p.m. and 2 a.m. It was always heavy in competition. Your competition was other artists on that roster. Your competition were the Beatles. Your competition were the Stones. Your competition was everybody else out there. It was always difficult. It's just difficult now.
Exactly. So the first thing that we get is a press release usually. So just a couple of suggestions on how to write a press release and how not to write a press release, because I get a lot of those.
Yeah, the first thing you have to remember as an artist or as a business is people like Jim, as he mentioned, gets hundreds, if not thousands, of press releases a day. If you are going to not hire a publicist, sometimes it's going to take maybe some time for them to notice you in their name, in their inbox. Start off with a really catchy subject heading. Start off with a really catchy lead. Always remember that nobody's going to read your second line unless they read your first line first. So make sure that it's short, it's to the point, and that it's kind of snappy, and focus on exactly what you're doing. You don't need to start off with the whole history of the band. Just talk about what they need to know in 6 seconds or less, because that's really how much time they're going to have to focus on you. Talk about who you are, what you're doing, when the show is, where it is, where people can get tickets for, and then you can go into it, because then the media outlet will then decide, even if they have the ability to cover something. If you send somebody a press release today for a show tomorrow, you're going to limit the amount of people that can actually do something in the next 4 hours. There might be people, but most often than not, they're not. So putting in the date, putting in the release date, putting in, does it get released 6 months from now? Or does the release date come out for New Music Friday tomorrow? Focus on those really key details and those essential information right at the top. Release date, venue, streaming platform, links, collaborators, all that stuff. I can't tell you how many times I will get an email because I have a Spotify playlist that's kind of out there. Not out there in terms of music, but it's kind of popular-ish. And I'll get an email saying, I'd love for you to add my song to the playlist. Here's the links. And it's a Google Drive link, it's an Apple link, and it's an MP3 in the email. And I will always write back, because I'm nice. Love this song after I listen to it. And if I do like it, love this song, send me over the Spotify link. But I won't write back, dude, you're asking me to put something on Spotify and you didn't provide me with a Spotify link or a pre-saved link, or just hit me up and say, the song comes out tomorrow. Can you take a listen to it now? And I'll send you the link tomorrow when I have it. Great. But 99.999% of people will just ignore your email. do the work for them. Make it super easy for them to get those details in there. Write it in a third person. Write it like Jim Norris is doing a seminar with this idiot Eric Alper on here. Don't do I am doing a, because I don't know who you are. So if Jim writes Jim Norris, the longtime publisher of Canadian Musician, now Canadian Entertainment, is going to be hosting a seminar for independent artists and businesses, I'm already knowing 90% of the story. So write it in the third person. Keep it short. Include your contact information at the bottom. Put your phone number, put your email, put your website, put your social links. Social links is something that I think is severely undervalued, and I'll tell you why. Going back to the whole, you need to be consistent with your music. I'll back up. I'll back up even further. The reason why Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and all those social media sites love stories, those posts that disappear after 24 hours, is because it helps them make money. It helps them bring back people day after day after day after day. It doesn't help you as an artist. And here's the reason why. If you are a media outlet and you go to Instagram and you as an artist are only doing stories that disappear after 24 hours and your last post was 6 months ago, I think you're no longer in the industry. I think you've disappeared. I think you've died. I think that you're not interested in social media and you play pop music and you're competing against Sabrina Carpenter and Lana Del Rey and Olivia Rodrigo, who post every day. You're nothing to them then. So post those posts to still continue to develop your story. And the reason why you want to put your social media outlets in that press release is because, as awful as it sounds, people want to know who you are as a person. Are you somebody that was a COVID denier? Are you a Nazi? Are you somebody who will sit there and slam everybody on the planet? Do you deserve to be written about? Are you a good person? That's the stuff that matters. There's an artist that I worked with back in the late 1990s who was in a former band that was massively popular, now going out on a solo tour. He was so hated because he treated the media so badly. I couldn't get a break with the media. Even though that I did all the right things, people came up to me and said there is absolutely no way I'm covering that guy ever again. Your social media should not give that perspective. So include that contact information, include the links to photos, your bios, MP3, WAV files, all of that stuff, and read it. Read it again and again. Make sure there's no spelling errors, and make sure that it reads like you care about them.
Excellent. So at what point should an artist or a small business person think about hiring a publicist?
I think when you've got a specific project to promote, when you've got a new album, a new single, a new music video, a new idea, a new tour, absolutely start thinking about it. You don't really have to establish your brand or your sound. I work a lot with artists that are just developing. I'm working with artists that is their first single, but I kind of dig what they're doing. When you need help navigating the media, when you don't know how to approach journalists or the media, when you're struggling to reach beyond your network of maybe local media, and when you're ready to invest in your career. I don't do this for free. I'm not expensive, but it does cost you some money. And when you need a real fresh perspective on, I need to know as an artist, is my bio good enough? Is my press releases good enough? Is this music good enough? And lastly, after all that, when you're just too busy to handle PR yourself, if you're truly hitting a wall, if you work, if you go to school, if you've got a family, if you've got a life, that's when you can hire a publicist as well. And most importantly, when you want to go for the brass ring, who's to say that you're not going to get Rolling Stone? You never know. That's what keeps me up at night. That's what gets me up in the morning. I never know what is going to happen with that day. I never make predictions. I never make guarantees, but I work really fucking hard for 16 hours a day to make sure that that artist has every opportunity to get heard and seen. And that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, what a lot of people don't realize is the amount of news, regardless of what medium it is, that comes from a publicist. I mean, I certainly know it because in our 40 some odd years, almost all the stories that we did were at least triggered by a publicist. And people think that they have this image of a newspaper or television station with hundreds of reporters running around. Well, especially nowadays, I mean, that's just doesn't exist. So a lot of it comes from a publicist. If you see somebody on CNN or somebody on 60 Minutes or somebody on one of the talk shows, almost in every case that was triggered and arranged for by a publicist. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, and it's funny because publicists are usually the first member of somebody's team. I've worked a long time with artists who don't have a manager, they don't have a booking agent, they don't have a record label. You really don't need those three pieces of the puzzle until you can start making money for not only yourself but for other people, because they work on a percentage. The publicist, though, can get you that access to those people in the industry, but they can also get that awareness for those people in the industry to notice you. But you're absolutely right. The publicist, people like me, we get it done. We are quick on email. We send off the photos when they ask for. We know what they're looking for with photos. We know how to name the files so it's easily read by the media outlet. There's a lot of times when artists will get a response from somebody and they're like, they got to go to work or they're taking a family trip. People like me who take family trips are still glued to that email because we don't want to lose or get the reputation that we're lazy or that we don't say what we're going to do. It's the worst thing that can happen to a publicist. So you want somebody that is willing to be there for you, and that's what people like me do.
Excellent. And obviously Eric's pretty easy to find. So if you need to contact him, it's not very hard. Just time for a few questions from people. There's a question mark at the bottom of your screen. You can stick your questions in there, or as many of you have been doing, they're in the chat function. So I'm going to...
or in case if we don't get to your question, email me, DM me. That stuff I check every single day.
Yeah, I just got a couple. Oh, there's a lot. Okay, let's see. Here's a good one from Daphne. I'm running into the issue that papers and radio stations won't interview us or write about us without an advertising buy-in. We can't afford to advertise with all of them. How do you get around that? And in our end, we consider that very sleazy personally. But Eric, if you can comment on that.
Yeah, I'm seeing that more and more with Bell stations, with Roger stations, even breakfast television in some aspects want those segments to be paid for now. They need to make money. They're all hurting. Despite the fact that like Rogers can make like $1 billion, everybody in the media is not generating the kind of money thanks to advertising that is really, really local and cheap on Facebook and Twitter. The one way to get around it is you don't get around it. It's just the rule that they have. The one way that you can help them out is figure out about a barter system, which is figure out if those outlets do any fundraising, figure out if they do any charitable events that you can volunteer to help out on. Jazz FM, for instance, that's fundraising every year. Campus Radio does fundraising every year. We always give them autographed posters or free tickets or things like that in order to just say thank you for helping them out. But the one way is that you don't get around it. You just have to keep finding those champions and working with them. At, say, breakfast television in Toronto, there's 7 producers. Sometimes one of them will say that, the other one won't. So just keep trying, though, because what they're saying today might not necessarily be the case 2 months from now. Just keep going at it. But there's no real magic bullet around stuff like that these days.
For sure.
Actually, sorry. The one way is around it is if you are doing a show, specifically a concert at a venue, ask the venue if they are doing any advertising on that radio station. It actually happens to me quite a lot. Is like I'll get hit up by somebody in promotions, and I'll say, "Great, I don't handle the money aspect of it, but let me ask the manager or the venue if they're advertising," and then I find out. And if they're doing advertising, that person may not even realize that that person is actually already spending money on you.
Right. I've got a question here from Aliso. Do you think YouTube is still as crucial as the other social channels?
Absolutely. More people watch YouTube on a day basis than all the other social media videos combined. It's still the single biggest, greatest, best invention to help out musicians. It is it breaks down borders, it breaks down geographically inclined, it breaks down languages. You can do closed captioned easily. It's free. It's still the best place to do it. In fact, a lot of media outlets won't cover you unless you have a video on YouTube. Again, it doesn't have to be a real video, just something for them to embed. If you do distribution, if you have distribution through DistroKid or CD Baby, they will already put your music with the album or single cover on it for you. You can use that. But study after study shows that people will read something online if there's a video component attached to it, even if it's a static JPEG. Not everybody is on Spotify. Not everybody has access to Apple Music. Everybody has access to YouTube.
What a lot of people don't realize is that YouTube is the second largest search engine after Google. It's also owned by Google. So, try it yourself when you're searching for something. It's usually something, through your Google search. But secondly, in many cases, it's something on YouTube. The third is Wikipedia comes up very often and things. So, if you're getting somewhere, you should be listed on Wikipedia. It's free. It's not easy sometimes. From Carmela, do you have any experience with classical music artists?
I do. Personally, I did the PR for 12 years for the BBC record label in Canada. I worked with Deona Boyd. I worked with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. I worked with John Zorn, who is kind of classical, kind of weird, kind of jazzy. Worked with him for a bit. So yes, classical music is something that I'm pretty well versed in. I tend not to listen to it a lot, but it's something that I'm fully aware of that it exists and where those people are, especially in CBC Radio Canada, Classical 96 and Classical 97 across the country as well, along with NPR stations in the US and the BBC in the UK.
Great, excellent. So we're going to wrap it up here in just a minute. I really want to thank Eric for the time.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks to everybody who joined.
Yeah, it's been great. As I mentioned, you'll get an email with the recording. And, if you do have further questions, certainly, as I say, Eric's easy to find, that's for sure. Just send him an email. I know that he'll respond. And if you're at any of...
Yeah, and also, too, if people really kind of want to see a lot of examples of press releases, just visit the website, ericalper.com. I post a lot of press releases, not just mine, but I'm always happy to promote everybody else's stuff as well. So you'll get a real good sense for not only tips that we talked about, like 10 tips for musicians on how to write a press release, but it also gives you a really good idea in between those really fun videos that I find and I post on the website about what other people are doing and how to do it, so you can grab and copy your own as well.
Excellent. And the next live event you're at, keep an eye out. You'll see Eric go tearing by like a crazy person.
I'm short, so I apologize if I bump into your knee.
Thank you very much for coming, and all the best in your
Jim.
career.
Thanks for having me, as always, man. It's so good to see you, and you do such great work, and you're doing an amazing service for everybody out there, and we all appreciate you on behalf of the music industry.
Thank you very much.